Your kidneys are filtering your blood right now. Not eventually, not when you finally get around to drinking more water. Right now, as you watch this, roughly 1.3 liters of blood are passing through two organs, sitting quietly in your lower back, getting cleaned and returning to your body. They will do this approximately 400 times today, without a single conscious instruction from you. And most people find out their kidneys are failing at stage 3, when 40 to 50% of function is already gone. Here is what nobody explains clearly. Your kidneys can lose 60% of their nephrons, the actual filtration units, before you feel a single symptom, because the organ has so much reserve capacity that it simply compensates and keeps going quietly while the damage accumulates underneath. By the time something feels wrong, the window for easy intervention has usually closed. So what is quietly driving that damage for most people? And what happens the moment you remove it? Let's start with what your kidneys actually do, because most people have this completely wrong. They are not passive filters, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. Blood pressure regulation happens here through precise moment-to-moment control of how much sodium your body retains versus excretes, a process constantly adjusting based on hormonal signals your kidneys are reading and responding to every few minutes of every day. Total fluid volume is managed here. Erythropoietin, the hormone that tells your bone marrow to manufacture red blood cells, is produced here. Not in the liver, not in the brain. Here. A filter just lets things through based on size. Your kidneys actively and continuously decide what stays and what leaves, every hour, while you notice none of it. Now here is where sugar enters the picture, and this is the part most people have completely backwards. When you eat fructose, specifically fructose, not all sugar behaves this way, it bypasses the regulatory system that handles glucose entirely. Glucose needs insulin to enter most cells, so there is a gate, there is a system managing how much gets in and when. Fructose has no such gate. It enters cells freely, and a significant portion of the fructose you consume gets metabolized directly inside kidney tissue itself, not just in the liver the way most people assume. That metabolism generates uric acid as a byproduct, and in a 2013 study published in the journal Nutrients, researchers found that high fructose intake consistently elevated intrarenal uric acid levels and triggered an inflammatory cascade inside the nephrons themselves. Do that repeatedly every single day for years, and you're slowly destroying filtration units that will never regenerate. 1 million nephrons per kidney. Gone means gone. So what actually happens when you stop giving them fructose for 30 days? Bear with me here, because the timeline is more specific than most people realize. Days 1 to 3, the fructose load drops to 0, and uric acid production inside the kidney tissue falls sharply. In a controlled clinical trial where participants eliminated all added sugar, uric acid levels dropped by an average of 0.5 millimoles per liter within 72 hours. That's enough of a biochemical shift to measurably reduce the inflammatory signal inside the kidney. The organ is not healed at this point, and I want to be clear about that, but the attack has stopped. Those are two very different things, and the difference matters more than most people appreciate. Days 4 to 7, blood glucose stabilizes, and this is where something unexpected happens to your blood pressure. Without the constant spikes from added sugar, insulin stops being released in large, repeated pulses throughout the day. And when insulin drops, the kidneys stop upregulating a sodium transporter called SGLT2, which means they stop reabsorbing as much sodium back into the blood from the filtrate. Less sodium retained means less water retained, and blood pressure starts coming down as a direct result. In a 2014 randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, replacing added sugar with equivalent calories from starch reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 6.9 millimeters of mercury in just 9 days. That's a larger reduction than most first-line blood pressure medications produce in the same time frame. 9 days, no prescription required. Week 2, the swelling reduces. Hands, feet, ankles, places where people have been holding fluid without connecting it to their diet. Most people assume this is early fat loss, but it's not fat. It is fluid that the kidneys had been holding because insulin was signaling them to. Once insulin stabilizes, the kidneys begin excreting that sodium, and the water follows automatically. Your body was holding fluid it did not need, and the kidneys are the mechanism releasing it, adjusting in real time within days of the hormonal signal changing. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's all interesting, but what does this look like for someone who already had some kidney stress going in? Because that's actually where the data gets genuinely surprising. Week 3. There is a protein called albumin. A healthy filtration barrier keeps albumin inside the blood where it belongs. A damaged one lets it escape into the urine, a condition called albuminuria. And albuminuria is one of the earliest detectable signs that something is going wrong inside the kidney, long before any symptoms appear. In a 2017 study published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, patients with early-stage diabetic kidney disease who eliminated added sugar showed a 31% reduction in urinary albumin excretion within 4 weeks. The filtration barrier was tightening. The leak was slowing down from just one dietary change. 31% reduction in protein leakage in 4 weeks, with no drug, no procedure, and no intervention beyond removing one ingredient from the diet. That number deserves a moment. Now, I am not saying this applies equally to everyone, and that is worth being honest about. If your kidneys were functioning well and your sugar intake was moderate, the 30-day changes will be real but smaller, period. But for the roughly 37 million Americans currently living with chronic kidney disease, most of whom have absolutely no idea, the fructose-kidney connection is not a footnote. It is one of the most well-supported and most consistently ignored mechanisms in the entire field of nephrology. Honestly, that gap between the evidence and what most people are told is one of the more frustrating things about this topic. Week 4, 30 days in. Water weight is down, typically 2 to 4 kilograms depending on starting diet and baseline intake. Blood pressure is lower, fasting glucose is lower, uric acid is lower, albuminuria is lower for anyone who had elevated levels going in. And inside the kidney, if you could measure the inflammatory markers directly, you would find them significantly reduced compared to 30 days earlier, not because of some supplement or protocol, but because the specific source of chemical stress was removed. What is also worth noting, and this often gets missed, is that kidney blood flow itself improves when blood pressure drops and systemic inflammation decreases, meaning the nephrons that are still intact are now operating in a better mechanical environment than they were 30 days ago. You did not just reduce the attack rate, you improved the conditions for whatever functional capacity remains. Here is what the data does not say out loud but clearly implies. What was actually happening was not gradual accumulation the way a filter clogs over time. Your kidneys were being chemically attacked on a daily basis by one specific metabolic pathway that fructose triggers and nothing else does at the same caloric load. Not fat, not protein, not starch, not glucose. Stopping that pathway is not like reducing stress on an overworked muscle. It's like turning off a targeted toxin source, which is why the response is fast, measurably fast, starting within 72 hours of elimination. And here is the scale of the problem most people are not aware of. Chronic kidney disease now affects 1 in 7 adults globally, roughly 850 million people, making it more common than diabetes and more common than cancer. Average added sugar consumption in the United States has sat above 50 grams per day for decades. That's 50 grams of added sugar every day, flowing through a filtration system that processes 200 liters of blood daily and cannot tell you when it's struggling. Simply put, the kidneys give you no warning until the damage is severe. That's not a design flaw, that's how reserve capacity works, and it's exactly why this matters. Which brings us back to where we started. Your kidneys are filtering your blood right now. They filtered it while you slept last night, while you ate every meal this week, through every gram of fructose you consumed without thinking about what was happening on the other end of that transaction. They did it all in complete silence because kidneys do not send pain signals in the early stages. They do not swell in ways you can see, and the fatigue they eventually cause is easy to attribute to a dozen other things before anyone thinks to check kidney function. 30 days without added sugar does not erase years of damage, and I want to be clear about that because this is not a miracle claim. But it does something more precise than a general health reset. It stops the specific attack. Uric acid drops within 72 hours, blood pressure drops measurably within 9 days, and the filtration barrier begins tightening by week 3, not because of some supplement or intervention layered on top, but because the one specific source of that particular chemical stress was removed, and the kidneys, which are far more responsive than most people give them credit for, began recovering on their own. These are documented, measurable, physiological changes in an organ that 850 million people are currently damaging without any awareness that it's happening. The question is not whether 30 days works. The question is what you're waiting for.